Two men, two completely opposite stories. And one of them is lying to the entire world right now. This morning, Donald Trump stood in front of reporters before boarding Air Force One at Palm Beach International Airport and made one of the most significant diplomatic announcements of this entire war. He said the United States and Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of hostilities in the Middle East. He said there are 15 points of agreement already on the table. He said Iran called him. He did not call Iran. He said a deal could happen within 5 days. And then he said the sentence that tells you everything about what happens if those 5 days produce nothing. He said if we cannot make a deal, we will just keep bombing our little hearts out. Within 2 hours, Iran's official foreign ministry spokesman stood at his own podium and said the opposite. He said Trump's claims of negotiations are inaccurate. He said there are no talks underway. He said Iran has not sent any representatives to meet with American envoys. He said Trump is trying to calm the energy markets with false statements about diplomacy that does not exist. Two men, two statements, made within 2 hours of each other on the same morning about the same alleged negotiations, and they cannot both be true. The conflict at the center of tonight's crisis is no longer simply military. It has become something more complex and in many ways more dangerous. This is now a war of narratives being fought in parallel with the war of missiles and bombs. And the outcome of the narrative war will determine whether the Strait of Hormuz opens this week, whether oil prices come back down from the levels that are destroying grocery bills across the Western world, and whether American soldiers come home alive or in flag-draped coffins. Here is what Trump actually said in full context, because the details matter enormously. Trump claimed his envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Iranian officials as recently as Sunday night. He said the talks led him to postpone strikes on Iranian power plants. He said Iran wants to make a deal badly. He asserted there are 15 points of agreement, including Iran accepting no nuclear weapons. He said the United States has discussed leadership options for Iran, including possible joint leadership. He said he wants as much oil in the system as possible as the Treasury eases sanctions on stranded Iranian crude. And then he said something that should stop every person paying attention cold. He said he has not heard from new Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khomeini and is unsure of his status. Stop at that sentence. The President of the United States is allegedly negotiating a comprehensive deal to end a war with Iran, and he does not know whether the Supreme Leader of Iran is alive, dead, or incapacitated. He is unsure of the status of the man whose government he is supposedly negotiating with. That is not a minor footnote. That is a flashing red light at the center of everything Trump said this morning. Now let me show you what Iran actually said. Because Iran's denial was not vague or diplomatic, it was specific and categorical. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said Trump's claims are inaccurate. No talks are underway. No Iranian representatives have met with American envoys. Trump is trying to calm energy markets with false statements. Iran did not soften its position or leave room for ambiguity. Tehran said the talks Trump described simply did not happen. Two men, two statements, one truth. And the answer to which one is telling the truth determines everything about what happens in the next 5 days. But here is where the verified reporting from multiple sources creates a picture far more complicated than either official statement. According to sources with knowledge of the back-channel communications, Trump's envoys are involved in discussions around potential diplomacy. But there has been no direct contact between the United States and Iran in recent days. Instead, Egypt, Qatar, and the United Kingdom have all been passing messages between the two sides. Egypt and Qatar have informed the United States and Israel that Iran is interested in negotiating, but with very tough terms. Iran's demands include a ceasefire, guarantees that the war will not resume, and compensation for the destruction caused by American and Israeli strikes. Read that back. Messages passed through Egypt, Qatar, and the United Kingdom. No direct contact. Iran interested in negotiating but demanding compensation from the country that has bombed it. That is the real state of the talks that Trump called very good and productive and Iran called non-existent. Both sides are technically telling a version of the truth. There are no direct talks. There are indirect communications. Trump is describing the indirect communications as negotiations. Iran is denying the direct talks because the direct talks do not exist. Could this word game be the difference between war and peace in the next 5 days? That is the question nobody in official Washington or Tehran is answering clearly tonight. Now let me show you the sequence of events that led to this morning's announcement. Because the timeline reveals the real strategic logic operating beneath the diplomatic language. Trump had issued Iran an ultimatum to reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours or face massive attacks. Iran responded by threatening to strike power plants across Israel and the Gulf if Trump followed through. Markets wobbled dramatically as catastrophic escalation appeared imminent. Then Trump reversed course, citing productive negotiations. U.S. stock futures surged, oil prices fell $13 per barrel. Wall Street rose on the back of Trump's words alone, and that market reaction is itself a strategic problem. Because if Trump exaggerated the talks to calm financial markets and the 5 days expire with no deal, markets will crash harder than they rose. The bigger the hope created, the bigger the collapse when that hope fails. Trump has effectively bet the global economy on a diplomatic outcome that Iran publicly denies is even being pursued. Now let me add the dimension that most mainstream coverage is completely missing. Trump said something extraordinary in the same breath as announcing peace negotiations. He described what is unfolding in Iran as regime change. Think carefully about what that means. Regime change means replacing the government of another country. You cannot simultaneously negotiate a peace deal with the government you are trying to replace unless the deal itself is about the terms of that replacement. And if that is what is actually being discussed in the back channels, that is not a ceasefire. That is a surrender document. And no Iranian government will sign a document that describes their own removal from power. There is another figure at the center of this story who deserves serious scrutiny: Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East who Trump tasked with negotiating a deal with Iran before the war, and who is now allegedly negotiating to end it. Witkoff told Sean Hannity at the start of the war that Iran has an endless supply of enriched uranium and bragged about having 60% enriched fuel, enough for 11 nuclear bombs. He told reporters 7 days into the conflict that Iranian negotiators said to him and Kushner directly that they would not give diplomatically what America could not take militarily. And critically, Witkoff and Kushner reportedly told the White House on the eve of the military campaign that Iran was simply using talks to buy time. That conclusion factored directly into Trump's decision to greenlight the entire operation. But here is the part that changes everything. Third parties present at the Geneva negotiations before the war say Witkoff's account of what Iranian negotiators said was simply inaccurate. The Iranians were not making a veiled threat about nuclear weapons. They were saying that all of their enriched uranium could go away as part of a comprehensive deal that included sanctions relief. Witkoff misunderstood or misrepresented what was said, and that misunderstanding helped trigger the largest American military operation since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The man whose grasp of the technical details of nuclear negotiations was questioned by every expert present in Geneva is now the man being sent to Islamabad to close the deal that ends the war his misunderstanding helped start. His co-negotiator is the president's son-in-law, whose only qualification for nuclear arms negotiations is his proximity to the Oval Office. Now let me show you the 5-day window in precise operational terms, because this is the clock that the entire world needs to understand right now. The USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship carrying 2,500 Marines, will be in position by Friday. Trump's 5-day diplomatic window ends on Friday or Saturday. If there is no deal by the time the Tripoli arrives, the next target shifts from Iranian power plants to Kharg Island. Kharg Island handles 90% of Iran's oil exports. Its destruction would take Iran's economy to zero overnight and push global oil prices toward $150 per barrel. The 5-day window is not a diplomatic courtesy. It is the interval between the announcement of negotiations and the arrival of the force that makes the next strike possible. The Israeli dimension of this story adds another layer of complexity. Israeli officials said they had been aware of indirect communication between the United States and Iran but were surprised by Trump's comments on Monday morning. The words used by the Israeli official were precise. "We did not know things were moving that fast." America's closest partner in this war found out about the alleged peace talks the same way the rest of the world found out, from a Trump post on social media, and Netanyahu was already drawing his red lines publicly on the same morning. He told his Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that there must not be a bad agreement with Iran. Netanyahu's red lines are the same ones they have always been. No nuclear program, no enrichment, no ballistic missiles, no proxy networks. Those are 4 conditions that Iran has refused to accept for 45 years. A Gulf diplomat with direct knowledge of the Geneva negotiations offered an assessment that cuts to the heart of the entire diplomatic picture. The diplomat alleged that Witkoff and Kushner were acting in Israeli interests to pressure the United States into a military confrontation. If that assessment is accurate, the men Trump sent to make peace helped make war instead. And those same men are now being sent back to Islamabad to make peace again. The entire architecture of America's diplomatic effort in this war rests on the credibility and competence of 2 men whose judgment produced the war in the first place. Now let me show you the human and economic cost that makes this 5-day window so critically important. This war has cost America over $23 billion in 23 days. It has pushed the cost to the global economy to $600 million per day in direct economic disruption. It has killed 1,400 Iranians, 800 Lebanese civilians, 12 Israeli civilians, and 14 American soldiers. It has closed the world's most important energy choke point for over 3 weeks. It has destroyed America's working relationship with every major NATO ally. For the family in Ohio filling their tank at $4 a gallon, this war is not an abstraction on a news screen. It is $40 more per week coming out of a budget that was already stretched. For the American soldiers stationed at a base in Qatar or Bahrain watching Iranian missiles get intercepted overhead, this war is the sound of sirens and the knowledge that the next wave might get through. For the Iranian family in Tehran whose neighborhood has been struck 3 times in 3 weeks, this war is rubble and grief and a government that tells them the Americans are lying about negotiations. Trump needs a deal. His economy needs a deal. His midterm elections 8 months away need a deal. Iran needs some version of a deal too, even if it will not say so publicly. Its cities are damaged, its oil revenues have gone to zero. Its military has been degraded by over 5,500 American and Israeli strikes. Its new supreme leader is operating from a location that the President of the United States admits he does not know. Both sides have strategic reasons to find an exit from this war. The gap between what both sides need and what both sides are willing to say publicly is the space where Witkoff and Kushner are supposedly operating right now in Islamabad. The Oman foreign minister, who served as lead mediator before the war broke out, said something that deserves to be heard clearly tonight. He stated that negotiations over the nuclear program had been making genuine progress, and that the U.S.-Israeli military operation was solely an attempt to reorder the Middle East in Israel's favor. That assessment from a neutral mediator who was present in the room when the talks collapsed frames the entire 5-day window in a different light. If the war began because the talks were working and someone wanted them to fail, then the question is not just whether the current talks are real. The question is whether the forces that ended the last round of diplomacy will allow this round to succeed. The next 5 days will answer the most important question of this war. Is what Trump calls 15 points of agreement the foundation of a historic deal that ends the conflict and reopens the Strait of Hormuz? Or is it a diplomatic illusion constructed to calm financial markets and buy time for the USS Tripoli to get into position? Is Iran's categorical denial of any talks a genuine statement of fact? Or is it a public posture designed for domestic consumption while back-channel messages continue moving through Cairo, Doha, London, and Islamabad? What we know with certainty tonight is this. Trump announced productive talks and 15 points of agreement. Iran denied any talks exist. Indirect communications are flowing through at least 4 intermediary countries. The USS Tripoli, carrying 2,500 Marines, will be in position by Friday. Kharg Island is the next target if talks fail. Israel was surprised by Trump's announcement and is already drawing red lines against a bad deal. The man driving America's diplomatic effort misunderstood what Iranian negotiators said in Geneva, and that misunderstanding helped start this war. And Trump himself does not know whether Iran's supreme leader is alive. 5 days. That is the window. That is the entire margin between a deal that ends this war and an escalation that nobody in the world is prepared for. If it closes with an agreement, the Strait of Hormuz opens, oil prices fall, and the soldiers come home. If it closes with nothing, Trump said the words himself, we will just keep bombing our little hearts out, and the USS Tripoli will be in position to make sure that promise is kept.